You spin me, angel, baby angel, like... Okay, this isn't funny. Spin Angels by Jean-Luc Sala and Pierre Money Chan. If you haven't heard of it, fret not. I fear most people aware of this YouTube channel haven't heard of it. In 2008, Marvel Comics partnered with French comic book company Soleil to print some of their catalog in English. Books like Skydoll, Ethak, and Husk, no relation. Great idea. American comic books are pretty much dominated by superheroes. Not saying that's all you'll find in American comics, but mostly, yeah. So the idea of trying to expose Americans to comics that aren't cape and cowl, that's great. You've got hardish sci-fi, religious sci-fi, epic fantasy, and James Bond meets Catholicism. Fun, right? Fun, right? If I had known what this book was about, I would not have bought it. I wasn't that interested in high-stakes globe-trotting Catholic intrigue when Dan Brown was doing it with the Robert Langdon books, so someone else doing the same thing isn't going to get me excited. But I didn't know, so now you get to hear me talk the good and the bad. The art is very unique, feels like a melding of the hyper-exaggerated characteristics you'd see in a manga and the less exaggerated character stuff you might see in an American comic. If you like the idea of a merging of those two very different stylings, this book might be right up your alley. Even though I do like some manga, though admittedly not as much as I do many American comics, I have to say I prefer to keep my chocolate and my peanut butter separate, at least in this case. The bad. I've never left the continental United States, but as soon as I opened this book, something felt off. A typical European comic book is slightly bigger than a typical American comic book. These dimensions might not look like a huge difference, but I suspect, I don't know for sure, but I believe when this book was first printed, it was bigger than the book I now hold in my hands. And when Marvel printed it for English-speaking audiences, they shrunk it down a tiny bit. Look at the speech bubbles from Spin Angels. Now notice how I don't need a microscope to read this American comic. And it's not just the words. See this panel with the Teletubby? I bet this would be a pretty funny joke, except the Teletubby is about 1/1000th the size of the entire page. And I'm pretty sure I have eye strain trying to see this panel. That's a minor complaint, but it's frustrating because Marvel didn't have to, I assume, shrink Spin Angels down to be comparable to the rest of their catalog. Look at the Grand Design books. They're so huge, I have to turn them on their side to fit on my shelf, and that's fine. There are no hard and fast rules on what size a comic book has to be. Here's another European comic, just a little taller than most of the books in my collection. And look at that, I can actually read the words without giving myself a headache. This book is also frustrating because it's incomplete. Imagine you went to watch Angels and Demons, and on top of that experience, the usher came in 3/4 of the way into the movie, dragged you out by your shirt collar, and beat you with a nightstick for the next 20 minutes, and then said you had to pay for another ticket to watch the rest of the movie. Spin Angels was 7 issues long, but the Marvel printing I have is only the first 4 issues. The last 3, as near as I can tell, have never been reprinted, at least not in English. I hate to say this, I have kind of gotten used to being treated like a very sickly fish being kept on a fishing line when it comes to comic books. Here's a gratuitously expensive book that isn't a complete story, just one small episode in a long sequence of events, come back in half a year to pay another exorbitant sum for more of the same. But I didn't think I'd have to deal with that kind of behavior from a company that is basically the little guy, and even worse, never even get the conclusion to the story I paid for. I didn't enjoy what I got, but I'd at least like to know how it all gets wrapped up. There were some threads that were barely teased in this volume that I did find interesting. The guy who claims he is God on the last page, the one priest, Marchese I think his name is, agreeing to work with not the big villains, but a group of slightly villainous people. I wanted to know what happened next. I might have actually enjoyed it if I, had the whole thing to decide for myself. This and a kind of similar experience with the fantasy book The Truthsayer's Apprentice made me think that I would rather have all of a bad book than part of a book that's just okay. But if you like getting teased with a partial story, try to find this. Maybe you'll like it more than I do.